Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, today I have Ross Overline on the show, and he's chairman, CEO, and co founder over at Scholars of Finance. And just so everybody's listening that knows, this is part of our Milken Global Conference coverage series where we bring you the best of individuals that were participants, that were VIPs, speakers, panelists, all the above. Ross, welcome to the show.
Adam, thanks for having me. I was so honored and flattered when your team reached out to ask if I'd come on, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Wonderful. And I definitely want to get into what you're doing over at Scholars of Finance and also just the overall angle and topic. So value-based leadership and finance. But before we do that, gotta talk Milken Conference is what brought us together, man. It's one of my favorite conferences of the year. That's my Super Bowl, I like to say. And I don't miss it for anything. So I'm just curious, on your end, have you been before? First time? What's your connection overall to the Institute and the conference?
I am a huge fan of Milken too. They have a program called the Young Leaders Circle, or YLC, which is a nomination-based program where people are nominated who leaders in the industry and finance and who are change makers, who they believe are high sort of potential for leadership under the age of 40. One of my dear mentors and friends, and now one of my board members, his name is Chris Campbell. He was a deputy secretary of the U.S. Treasury and ran the Senate Finance and Judiciary committees as staff director. He told me about Milken several years ago. He nominated me to YLC. I was invited to apply and interview, and to my surprise, they wanted me to join. And I've been attending the global conference for the last 2 years since, and have made very close friends there. A lot of our donors, our advisors, our supporters attend Milken, and so it's a great chance for me to see a number of our largest donors and supporters and former podcast guests of our own too. So I love Milken. I learned a ton, a lot of inspiration every time. So big shout out to anyone from Milken listening. Thank you for all that you do.
And it's awesome. So one of the things I love about Milken is just the content. So when I think about it, like obviously I get to talk to many different individuals from different walks of life, industries, etc. But what I like about it is I'm kind of like a kid in a candy store. I can run into you run into any panel, you go into any talk, and you're gonna get something out of it. And you know everything we've vetted and the right people on stage, and then they're industry experts or otherwise, or they're working on something like huge. What are some of your favorite components? Like, why should people be attending this conference? Like, what do you think?
There's so many ways you can answer this. At this point, every time I go to Milken, I'm basically stacked up with meetings with friends and mentors and supporters of ours. And so I suppose if you're in that community, in the Milken community, and know the people there, it's like once a year where so many of the people that you want to meet with,
You know way you're wrangling them otherwise in one place. That ain't happening.
in the same place. They're all in one place. I'm listening great. So usually I have a full suite of meetings, and some of the talks are so inspiring. I got to hear a couple of the co-founders, Henry Kravitz and George Roberts of KKR, do a talk this year. And it was just so incredible to hear their thoughts on integrity, on leadership, on trust, and on friendship, because they've been friends for so long and such dear friends building KKR. And I also got to hear Jonathan Haidt, one of my favorite professors out of NYU, who teaches ethics and leadership there. He wrote a book, The Anxious Generation, and has been on quite a tour for that. And we got to chat. We're following up. So the talks are really inspiring. And I've got to say, every time I've gone to Milken, I've been introduced to or met people who have been on our podcast, who have become donors in our work in Scholars of Finance, have become leaders in our movement. And so I've been really grateful for the incredible leaders I get to meet there.
That's amazing. Let's go further into Scholars of Finance. Maybe let's start by talking a little bit more about Scholars of Finance. Maybe let's start.
Sure. The high level on SOF, Scholars of Finance, is a rapidly growing organization on a mission to inspire character and integrity in the finance leaders of tomorrow. We invest in undergraduate students through leadership development, mentorship, and the active support of finance executives and investors to help the next generation become the high-performing, purpose-driven, principled future leaders that finance needs. And then we help our students join top firms and funds, give them a lifelong support community to empower them to spend their careers serving the greater good using finance, which we believe is the single greatest lever for effecting positive change on earth. Practically, we teach 4 core values with 12 leadership principles that exemplify them. The values we teach are integrity, humility, compassion, and excellence. We're still a startup. Our board likes to say we're a scale up now. This was my nights and weekends passion project during my early career at Piper Sandler, at Twitter, at SoFi. And I quit my job at SoFi, where I was on the leadership team launching what is now SoFi Bank, to step in full time in 2019, about 6 years ago. And it was a little nonprofit project. We had 3 schools and 40 students. And 6 years later, we've now raised over $10 million, almost 20 of us on staff full time. And we've impacted more than 7,000 students with our programs in a meaningful way. We're at over 60 universities, and we have approximately 4,000 students actively in our programs right now. And we've been super lucky to have amazing partners and supporters from our founding partners like Blackstone, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Schwab, US Bank, and many others. Our donors and advisors, incredible leaders, Richard Davis, a former chairman, CEO at US Bank, Daniel Peterzak, who's the global head of private credit at KKR, Harry List, who's on the boards of Microsoft, Visa, Lululemon, or Chris Larson, the executive chairman of Ripple. There's just so many amazing, I can't name them all, but so many amazing firms and leaders that believe in our vision and our mission of a future where all finance leaders steward the world's capital to serve the greater good and do that in an ethical, principled way.
I see the title here, co-founder. I just have to ask, like, how this idea originally come about? Like, how this come to be?
Yeah. I think the way to answer this question is to explain the thesis of Scholars of Finance and then how it started. The thesis is really born upon looking at the problems that we want to solve. When you look at the problems of the world, poverty, climate change, all the major issues facing the world, the price tag on these is trillions of dollars. There's 4 billion people living on less than $10 a day, approximately around the world, over 4 billion. Just spending $250 per person, you're already at $1 trillion. If you invest $25,000 per person, you're already at $100 trillion. And they need infrastructure, electricity, sewage, housing, healthcare, education. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars of investment to solve just one problem. Climate change and environmental degradation is another several $100 trillion problem by major estimates, from Bank of America, BCG, other firms. The list just goes on. And you have to ask yourself who has that much capital and the ability to allocate it towards solving these problems. Well, over thousands of years, humanity's built systems to solve our problems at increasing levels of scale and complexity. We've built governments, we've created nonprofits, we've created businesses, all of which organize capital to solve our problems. But there's one system that allocates all the capital they organize, which is finance. The financial system directs where capital flows, which drives the evolution of all of those systems. There are people who decide where to invest billions of dollars. Are they investing it in tobacco companies that cause cancer or biotech companies that cure cancer? And if you extrapolate that small reductive example out to thousands of decisions per year, the financial system allocates over $300 trillion in private capital, in non-philanthropic, non-government capital, almost 80% of GDP by some estimates globally. So simply stated, finance is the largest system we have for making the world a better place. This all struck me in my junior summer of college because I was invited to intern at Piper Sandler. I'm from a small farm town in Minnesota originally and moved back to Minnesota after being away for a bit. It was in Minneapolis for college. And an MD invited me to intern for him at Piper Sandler on the equity research team. I got to study fundamentally and just topically over 4,000 public companies, essentially serving the economic system. And I learned the influence that finance has on the world. And as this was striking me as a college student, the chairman and CEO of the firm, then Andrew Duff, he came and spoke to the intern class like he does every year. And he basically explained that they built a top middle market investment bank by doing two things: by serving other people, solving other people's problems, and by staying true to their values and principles, being honest, doing the right thing, etc. And it struck me that if every single person in the financial system did that, the financial system would achieve its full potential for accelerating human prosperity and also minimizing all of the dislocations, all of the collapses like the great financial crisis, etc. And so he says, if any of you ever want to chat, shoot me an email. And apparently of 60 interns, I was the only one who did. I later encouraged I got a 15-minute meeting and I later encouraged a couple of my internship cohort mates to email him too. They couldn't believe he took me up on it. And they got a meeting. And after 15 minutes, he offered to meet again for an hour. And in that hour, that second meeting about a month later, I basically shared with him what I shared with you. kind of my thoughts on the financial system, its influence on how if everyone did what he said, it would transform the system. And I essentially said, I'm a college kid and I just learned how to use Excel like 4 months ago. No one no one's gonna believe me and listen to me, but they will listen to you. Will you come give that talk to my classmates? And he said, yes. And so a group of my classmates and I, 6 months later, held what we called the Scholars of Finance Leadership Symposium with about 150, almost 170 people there. And there was so much demand. People said, you got to do this again. If you do it next year, we'd love to come back. So we made it a second annual event. We hosted it again. As a second event, it almost doubled in size. It was almost 3 people in Minneapolis. And Richard Davis, who was the then chairman and CEO of US Bank, the fifth largest bank in the country, was one of our keynotes. And at the end of the night, he pulled my co-founder and I aside and he said verbatim, what you've done tonight's incredible. Finance needs this. You need to do this for more students at more universities in more cities. And I'll help make sure it happens. Just promise me you'll commit to growing this. Well, we put that to heart and did some research. And what we found was surprising. There's no organization teaching ethical, principled leadership and finance to undergrads. We also learned that college is one of the 3 most formative times in our lives for establishing our identity and values. Before the age of 3, when you hit puberty and your neurochemistry changes in middle school, high school, and then in college, when you're independent outside of your parents' home for the first time, choosing who you are and how you're going to act. And college is the entry point into financial services today. A lot of our founding partners are now recruiting students their sophomore spring for their junior summer internship 18 months later, right? And so college was clearly this critical intervention point, and there's no organization teaching ethical leadership. And that was really critical because, you look back when this all started, movies like Wolf of Wall Street, The Big Short, Gordon Gekko, the media just depicted the worst actors in the system. And there was real bad behavior, the great financial crisis, the sales scandals at different firms, all sorts of issues. Even though the industry is mostly really kind, good people just trying to provide for their families and do their part in the economic system, it's sort of a situation where the bad apples spoil the reputation of the bunch and create this reputational problem that then created this adverse selection bias. What we noticed was our classmates who wanted to make an impact weren't even considering financial services as a career path. And a lot of the students were just like, I want to make a lot of money. They Google, how do I make the most money? They see investment banking, and that's the career path they choose. All of that together, we thought, he's right. Finance needs this. Like, we actually do need to build an organization at scale that's teaching principled leadership to undergrads. Yeah, that's really how it started.
Wow, what an amazing story. And to see like that ripple effect now of how many students or lives have been affected just roughly?
Yeah, it's a great question. We often cite that we've impacted over 7,000 students to date. Those are students who have been members in SOF, been to our leadership symposium, been materially affected by our programs. So that number is over 7,000, 6,000 of whom have graduated the leadership development program, our flagship program. There's another metric that we sometimes reference that we've impacted over 11,000 students. That additional 4,000 are students who attended speaker series, a part of a symposium. They've had a lighter engagement with us, but have been exposed to our programs more lightly. But so depending on which number you say, we could go out to the world and say we've impacted over 11,000 students to date. We reference the 7,000 number because those are the 7,000 that we feel like we've actually had a material influence on.
Let's spend a moment of time here with the time we have left, and let's talk to the executives that are out there, the senior executives, and what they can do to fulfill their responsibilities as leaders, whether it's to their employees, clients, communities. Let's talk to the business community a bit.
Yeah, I want to preface by saying that I am in my mid 30s and I don't consider myself qualified to give any seasoned executives any advice. So I just want to begin by just, humbly recognizing that I'm not even 15 years into my career yet. And although I voraciously bought wisdom from my mentors, I read usually 20 books a year, trying to learn, trying to understand the world. I listen to hundreds of podcasts. Although I've been working really hard, I've already put my 10,000 hours in studying leadership and trying to be a better leader because God knows I have a lot of work to do to become a better one myself. I just don't consider myself an expert or qualified, but I do sometimes have executives, very, very senior people ask me for my thoughts my advice. They recognize we spend a lot of time with young people, with college students, with analysts, associates, VPs, with younger members of the financial community. And when they ask me, what can I do, Ross, to maximize my impact, to help advance this mission in my world, there's a handful of things I share, and I'll be brief, but I'm happy to share more here if you want, Adam. Number one, your circle of influence, right? Like with your direct reports, with your team, with your company, with your analysts and interns, the people that you manage, the people that you work with day to day, every single one of those people is a life that can ripple effect through many other lives. And so every interaction you have, you should take seriously. You should really try to maximize the good that you do and the positive impact you have, the affirmation, the encouragement, setting very high expectations, pushing and challenging for excellence. Try to maximize how much you really kind of unlock and unleash every person around you's potential. I think is number one. Number two, and this really should be number one, but number two is you got to lead by example, right? We talk a lot about integrity, humility, compassion, excellence. And the only way that we will create a financial system where those virtues are imbued in the system at scale, it starts with every single one of us individually doing it ourselves. The only thing we can control is our own actions, our own decisions, our own words. And so we have to lead by example and do the hard work, the introspective work of cultivating integrity, speaking up when it's hard, speaking up when it's hard, pushing back on someone we disagree with, of cultivating humility, seeking feedback, seeking constructive feedback, looking in the mirror of our flaws and our weaknesses, while also recognizing our strengths and our talents and how to double down on those, cultivating compassion, right? Cultivating contentment, knowing when we have enough, cultivating gratitude, reveling in what we have, and cultivating generosity, right? Giving of ourselves, of our time, of our resources. Because in financial services, greed is like the single largest risk that all of us face to our moral virtue. Adam Smith himself even talks about this in the theory of moral sentiments. Like all of us have to recognize we're in this system where greed has been sort of normalized to some degree, or at least as long as we're doing no harm, we don't have to keep our own avarice or desire in check. And so I do encourage our executives, our donors, be philanthropic, give back, mentor, serve, right? Really protect ourselves from greed. I don't give them any advice on cultivating excellence, the fourth virtue, because they're finance executives for a reason. They've demonstrated that in spades to get to where they are. And so I think just living out the values and the virtues ourselves is really important. And then, of course, selfish plug, we encourage them to donate, to speak to our students, to mentor our students, to actually give their time and resources to this cause where we can actually give them a platform where they can actually make an impact on the next generation.
Yeah. Well, Ross, this has been great having you on the show today and learning more about all the work you're doing over at Scholars of Finance. That being said, if somebody's listening to this and they want to learn more about Scholars of Finance or your podcast, of course, love to support other podcasters. How do they do that? How do they connect?
Yeah, our website is scholarsoffinance.org. You can email us, hello@scholarsoffinance.org. You can also get in touch with me over email. I'm just ross@scholarsoffinance.org. You can find me and you can find SOF on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on X, on most of the major social media platforms. And our podcast called Investing in Integrity, that's on all major podcast platforms. If you search either my name or SOF or Investing in Integrity, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you'll find us there too.
Amazing. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so you can click on the links and head right on over. And speaking to the audience, if this is your first time with Mr. Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way on your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Ross, man, appreciate you coming on.
Adam, thanks for having me. Hope anyone finds this useful. And thanks for all the amazing work that you do to help mission-driven people keep pushing their missions forward. Thanks for the invite to talk today.